In the heart of West Africa, where the dense emerald canopy of the forest of Songo veiled secrets older than time itself, there lived a people who revered the land and its ancient powers. The villagers of Songo were known for their harmony with nature and their sacred bond with the spirits that dwelled in the rivers, the trees, and the wind. Each morning, offerings were placed at the foot of the ancestral tree, and each evening, the wind carried the villagers' songs across the fields like a prayer. But none were as revered or as feared as the forest that bordered the village, a place where the elders warned children never to venture too far. The air within the forest was thick with mystery, humming with the low vibration of unseen forces. There, they said, the earth breathed and the trees listened. Shadows moved in patterns that could not be explained, and the moonlight glinted off scales that should not exist. That forest was home to the guardian. A woman of legend, part human, part serpent, who watched over Songo like the coiled root of a great baobab. Hunters who disrespected the forest's balance never returned. But when the drought came and the crops failed, the villagers awoke to find fresh water in their pots and fruit on their trees. All gifts from her, whispered the elders. Her name, passed in hushed tones and reverent song, was Iadil. Iadil had once been a woman like any other in Songo, bright-eyed, fiercely intelligent, with a will like iron wrapped in silk. She was the daughter of the village herbalist, Ialode, a respected matriarch known for her wisdom and deep knowledge of healing. Iadil grew up surrounded by roots and leaves, tinctures and chants. She learned the ways of the earth as others learned to breathe. As a child, she had always been drawn to the forest's edge, where the boundary between the known and the mystical thinned. She would sit for hours among the ferns, listening to the wind rustle stories through the branches. By the time she was 16, her name was already being spoken by those seeking cures for maladies both physical and spiritual. But Iadil's path was never meant to be ordinary. One night, during the festival of Umoja, when the moon bloomed full and white like a sacred blossom, Iadil ventured deep into the forest to gather moon-bathed herbs. It was there, in a clearing lit by silver beams, that she found it, a wounded python, its silver-scaled body pierced by the arrows of poachers who had violated sacred ground. Ignoring her own fear, Iadil carried the heavy creature in her arms back to a sacred grove. She tended its wounds with oils and whispered prayers into its earless head. Night after night, she returned, feeding it, caring for it, singing to it songs older than speech. When the python recovered, it revealed its true form, not merely an animal, but a spirit of the forest, one of the ancient protectors bound by oath to the balance of the land. Its voice echoed in her mind, and in return for her compassion, it offered her a gift, the power to become one with it. To protect, to heal, and to destroy, if ever Songo were threatened. Iadil accepted, not out of pride, but out of love for her people and land. She was reborn that night, her blood mingling with ancient magic. From then on, she could shed her skin and become a serpent of immense size and power, her eyes glowing like coals beneath the forest's canopy. Years passed, and the people of Songo prospered under Iadil's silent guardianship. Crops flourished, the sick were healed, and the animals of the forest grew fat and unafraid. Though Iadil was rarely seen, her presence was deeply felt. In the sudden bloom of a dying plant, in dreams where she warned of danger, and in the whispered voices that drifted on the night wind. Yet peace is a delicate thing. From the parched lands of the north came whispers of a warlord, Abadil the Iron-Toothed. A former general turned tyrant, he believed in power over all. With an army of mercenaries and war machines, he swept through regions like a plague. Villages were burned, their leaders executed, their children taken. Abadil worshipped no god, revered no spirit. He saw the world as his to conquer, its people as tools or obstacles. His soldiers wore armor crafted from the bones of fallen enemies and bore banners dipped in blood. And now, Abadil turned his eyes south, to Songo, a village untouched by war, rich in fertile land, gold, and beauty. Scouts were sent to map the area. Villages nearby were razed, their rivers poisoned. Refugees arrived at Songo's gates, carrying tales of horror. In the village square, fear grew like wildfire. Who could stand against such evil? In desperation, the village elders gathered in the sacred hut. The air was thick with incense and tension. Maku, the ancient diviner with milky eyes and fingers like dry bark, cast his cowries onto a lion-skin mat. As they landed, the patterns drew shapes that made his lips tremble. "The great eye watches from the east," he murmured. "Fire and iron descend like rain. Only she who walks with the serpent can stop the flood. But to summon her is to awaken death." The elders fell silent. Iadil had not been summoned in decades. Her power was immense, but unpredictable. She had become something beyond human, beyond understanding. They debated into the night, voices rising and falling like drums. Some argued she was a myth, others feared her wrath more than Abadil. But in the end, they chose life, and lit the signal fire at the edge of the forest. A spiral of smoke rose into the sky, curling like a serpent. And deep within the ancient shadows, Iadil stirred. Her eyes, like molten gold, opened for the first time in years. She tasted the air and knew war was coming. Her time had returned. Iadil moved like mist through the ancient trees, silent and vast. As her body shifted from human to serpent, the forest bent around her in reverence. Branches curled back, birds fell silent, and even the wind held its breath. The forest knew her. She was its daughter, its guardian, its wrath. As she approached the border of Songo, her thoughts turned to the faces she had once known, the children she had healed, the elders who had kissed her forehead in gratitude, the friends who had faded into memory. Time had slowed for her since her transformation, but emotion had not. Fear, sadness, love, they pulsed in her heart like a second heartbeat. At the edge of the village, the elders waited. Torches flickered in the dusk, and the villagers stood in hushed clusters. When Iadil emerged from the trees in her human form, tall, dark-skinned, with coils of black hair and eyes that burned gold, even the bravest among them stepped back. Maku bowed low, his bones creaking. "Guardian of Songo, we call upon you in our hour of greatest need." "I know," Iadil said, her voice like smoke over coals. "The warlord comes. And with him, death." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Then you will fight for us?" asked a woman holding her child. Iadil turned her gaze to the child, a girl, no older than 6, eyes wide and full of silent hope. "I will do more than fight," Iadil said. "I will become what they fear most." That night, the village held a silent ritual. Not a celebration, but a summoning, a pact of purpose. Iadil stood in the center of the ancestral circle, surrounded by the elders and the people she had once known as family. Fires burned in the 4 cardinal directions, their flames fed by sacred oils and serpent wood. "If I do this," Iadil warned, "you must all understand, I may not return the same. I may not return at all. The spirit within me does not know mercy." Maku nodded. "We understand." She took a blade carved from obsidian and made a shallow cut across her palm, letting her blood fall onto the earth. Then, from the shadows of the trees, the great python emerged, its eyes mirrored hers, ancient and knowing. Iadil stepped forward and pressed her bloodied hand to its head. A column of fire rose from the earth, and the villagers gasped as she began to change. Her body lengthened, her skin darkened into scales of onyx and jade, and her eyes became slits of burning amber. She towered above them, majestic and terrifying, not fully human, not fully beast. The Serpent Woman of legend had awakened. Abadil's army reached the outskirts of Songo 2 days later. Their arrival was not quiet. Trees were felled to make way for wagons. Animals fled. The sky darkened with smoke. Abadil himself stood tall atop an elephant, his armor gleaming with stolen gold, his teeth sharpened to points. He laughed when his scouts reported no visible defenses. "They cower," he sneered. "They pray to myths." But that night, as his men set up camp, something moved among the shadows. A hiss like steam, a rustle like wind through tall grass. One by one, sentries vanished. Then the ground beneath the soldiers trembled. Iadil struck without warning. She came as a shadow, as a scream in the dark. Her serpent form coiled around trees, lifted men into the air, crushed them like dry branches. Abadil's men screamed, firing arrows that bounced off her scales like pebbles against stone. Flames were hurled, she swallowed them whole. Only a handful survived to stumble back to the warlord's tent, eyes wide, speaking of a demon, a goddess, a monster. Abadil clenched his fists. So the legends are true. He did not retreat. He prepared for war. Abadil was no fool. Though arrogant, he understood fear, and how to conquer it. He summoned his war priests, men who once bathed in sacred rivers but had since traded spirit for blood. Together, they forged weapons laced with dark magic, blades carved from obsidian dipped in venom and iron pikes etched with glyphs meant to pierce the spirit. Drummers beat the rhythm of war, and Abadil's legions moved under the canopy of night. Songo's defenders, few and frightened, braced behind hastily raised barriers. At their center stood Iadil, neither woman nor beast, wrapped in coils of scale and shadow. When Abadil's army surged, they met a wall of wrath. Iadil descended with fury, fangs flashing, tail whipping with the force of tempests. She moved between forms, one moment towering as a python the size of 3 elephants, the next, a woman wielding primal power. But Abadil had prepared. His war priests unleashed curses into the air. Spells that clung to Iadil like fire to dry grass. She faltered, her roar turning into a cry. One of Abadil's champions pierced her shoulder with a spear tipped in iron. Her blood hissed as it touched the earth. Songo's warriors rushed to protect her, blades drawn, but they were outnumbered, outarmed. Iadil, weakened but unbroken, gathered herself for one final act. She struck the ground with her tail, opening a chasm that swallowed dozens. Then, calling on the spirit of the ancient python, she released a blinding light, pure, furious, ancestral. The battlefield froze as her cry echoed through the hills. When the dust settled, both armies had fallen back, broken and bloodied. Abadil's face twisted with rage. She bleeds, he said. She can be killed. And Iadil, coiled beneath the moonlight, whispered to herself, but so can he. The dawn that followed was silent and smoky. Birds no longer sang. Even the insects held their breath. Songo was not celebrating, it was mourning. The ground was littered with charred shields, broken spears, and bodies of the fallen. Women wailed softly while elders anointed the dead. Iadil lay beneath the sacred tree, her body wrapped in healing herbs, her wounds tended by the last of the village's medicine women. The serpent spirit within her was quiet, slumbering, conserving strength. But Iadil's thoughts were aflame. She had underestimated Abadil. And worse, the villagers had tasted victory but seen her bleed. Fear mixed with awe could curdle into doubt. Maku approached her slowly. You should rest. I do not need rest, Iadil said. I need answers. He hesitated. There is a prophecy, one we feared to speak aloud. She looked up, her golden eyes piercing. Speak it now. Maku knelt beside her. The serpent guardian can only destroy the tyrant if she remembers who she was, and what she gave up. Iadil frowned. I remember everything. No, Maku whispered. You remember pain. But not love. And that is the key. As night fell again, Iadil went alone to the river, the place where, long ago, she had first kissed a boy who would grow to be a traitor, who sold secrets to Abadil for a handful of gold. She looked at her reflection, a warrior, a weapon, a myth. But the girl within her stirred. The one who had dreams, not just duties. The one who once believed in more than vengeance. She whispered to the water, I must become whole again.